One.
Aloha everyone. This is the Committee on Higher Education. We are here today at 3 p.m. for an informational briefing for the University of Hawaii's budget. Topics to be discussed will include, but not be limited to, the Cancer Center, to the Clarence T.C. Ching Athletics Complex, Atherton Ymca, Sinclair Library, faculty research positions, delinquent tuition fees, campus expenses and tuition revenues, and Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. It's Tuesday, February 23rd. We're in room 229. And my vice chair, Senator Michelle Kidani, is here in the Capitol with me. Is there anyone from the committee online that we know of? They probably will be joining later. So why don't we get started? Since we do have a hard stop at 4:30, so we have an hour and a half, and I'd like us to try to keep our questions and our answers concise as possible. It is not my intent to go over all of the questions, and I thank the university for sending that in to us. But basically ask questions and clarify any of the responses that we've gotten, or if members have any questions on any of the responses that we received, or if anything else moves you at the time, please feel free to ask the questions. Members, I did send out what was submitted to us by the university, so you should have gotten that, a hard copy as well as an electronic copy. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? Why don't we start with athletics, since it's probably the most timely and top of mind with everything going on with Aloha Stadium. So Aloha President, how are you today? I think you're muted.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. Can't believe I did that.
That's okay. We all do that. No matter how many times we do this, we still do that. So President, my understanding from the response that you folks sent in, that you have not formally requested any funding for the Ching Athletic Complex through the governor or through the ledge, but you have made a presentation to the House, and you have shared with us your estimates to renovate the Ching field. So would you kind of just give us a brief overview of the budget that you did present, or you think you need in order to make that work?
Okay, sure, I'd be glad to. So that is correct. The Board of Regents approved the budget last year. We submitted it through our standard processes. Then we got the surprise that we would need to find a place to play football starting this season if we want fans, and by next season at all. We assessed a variety of possible sites based on the assessment, and this was primarily done by the UH Manoa Athletics Department under the leadership of David Matlin, who I believe is on a conference meeting right now. We identified the use of the Ching Field as the most optimal place. It had many of the facilities we needed, but not all. It's on campus, so it has some benefits. We believe we can get up to about 10,000 spectators there, and it will provide an opportunity for us to really engage our students and fans. So the table that we gave you is our current estimate. This continues to be a work in progress. And you can see the items. This is on, I think, the 21st page of what we submitted to you yesterday. The largest ticket item is the two large ticket items are the grandstands, and we're completing the assessment about buy versus rent. Some of that is going to be based on whether we believe this is a 3-year problem or longer. And the longer it goes, obviously, the more favorable it is to purchase the grandstands. And the other major item is the electronics and infrastructure for press box, electrical, telecommunications, so that we can broadcast. And that's critical because that's one of our major revenue sources. And it's part of why playing football even without fans, is financially advantageous over playing football, not playing football, because it still generates revenue that supports the rest of our athletics program. And obviously playing with fans is better than financially and programmatically than playing without. So I do see that David Matlin is on, and I think we'd be glad to answer questions about any of the specific items, or I can help with any of the financial questions. We're collectively all finding the money.
Okay, thank you very much. Nice to see you, Dave. But let me just ask, my vice chair, do you have any questions?
I do.
Okay, you want to start? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to, for the public's clarification, the governor says that the stadium, Aloha Stadium, can continue to be used for a couple more years. So do you guys have a different opinion as to why the governor is saying this, and which is why the need to redo the Ching Stadium for your football program? Can you explain, please?
Can I just interrupt 1 second? I forgot to read the housekeeping, so let me just get this on. This meeting, including the audio and video of remote participants, is being streamed live on YouTube. You will find links to reviewing options for all Senate meetings on the live and on-demand video page of the legislature's website. In the likely event that we have to abruptly end this informational briefing due to major technical difficulties, the committee will reconvene to discuss any outstanding business on Thursday, February 25th at 3 p.m., and a public notice will be posted on the legislature's website, and this is a recording.
I'm sure he wished it was.
Okay, I'm sorry. Please continue.
I can't really explain it, but I can tell you the information and fact on which we have charted our course, Vice Chair Kidani. We were informed in December face-to-face by the Stadium Authority Chair and the stadium manager, and this was in a meeting with David Matlin and I, that the stadium was not going to be available with fans for the 2021 season. And they believed it was unsafe. And then they told us that after the 2021 season, the stadium would not be available at all. So they did present us the option of playing in 2021 only without fans. And that's the basis of our assessment. To the extent we've been able to investigate the actual safety and as has been reported, while I have a seat on the Stadium Authority, which I delegate to David Matlin, we're not privy to, it's a non-voting ex officio, and we are excluded from executive sessions. But it is our understanding that they believe, based on the engineering studies they have, that the stadium is not safe with fans at all. I do not fully understand the governor's, what information he has that leads him to believe it either is safe or can be made safe. We aren't privy to the conversations between the Stadium Authority, the governor, and DAGS about what repairs might be possible to be conducted and what the result of such repairs might be. But let's see, I've been working for UH for over 40 years, and it seems improbable to me that any appropriation made this session could be deployed in a fashion that would result in any repairs whatsoever to Aloha Stadium by the time of our first game this year. So if we get proven wrong, so be it. We haven't yet spent any of the funds that we believe need to be invested into Ching Field, but we should be starting that within a week or two. And unless somebody can tell us, with a unified opinion, we don't see any way we can change course, given what we were advised by the Stadium Authority.
So the advice and the opinion of the Stadium Authority, do you have that in writing?
No, we do not.
I think we should request that.
I think you should request that, for the protection of the university, if, for the governor to say differently bothers me. I'm not saying he's right or he's wrong. I'm just saying there's
Right.
two different opinions, and I think we should get that cleared up as soon as possible.
We can do our best to try, but like you, we're a little bit on the sidelines in this one. But
Maybe this committee should ask for
Yeah,
that.
we will, how about we send a letter asking that for the thing, and,
I mean, they have not disputed that that's what they told us. And we've been very public, and they've been pretty clear that that is their view.
maybe we can ask for the engineering reports.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask, I'm looking at the budget that was provided, and under capital improvements is 1.9 million, and that says for the grandstands. Now, that's for purchase, I assume, because you can't use CIP monies for rent, right?
Right.
So if you're renting it, it would have been under operating. So at this point, you know, whether, you're definitely going to need it at least 3 years, right? I mean, if they can build it on time.
Assuming Senator Gianni's inquiry doesn't get us a different opinion, but yes,
Yeah.
that's our assumption, that it's a minimum of 3 years.
Minimum of 3 years, and the cost to rent for 3 years, I'm not sure, I think it would be probably more economical for us to actually buy it, and because then you would have a stadium as an alternative for a lot of other things, and I'm sure there's other sports that could utilize the field and spectators, and you can be more
Right.
creative as
I think
to,
that's correct. We were, and that's why we've shown it this way. We have gone back and forth on this one, looking at the pricing, and, you know, we had to start preparing this budget, you know, based on our best estimates. And David Matlin and his team have been continuously refining them. But this is what we have provided you is the most recent update. And as you can see, at this point, our best projection is that we would purchase, and that's why we have that in the capital improvement column. 2 weeks ago, it was in the rental column. So that's actually why we have a, you know, that column had a larger number under operating previously.
and is that the estimate that they're giving you to purchase, or is that just?
David, you want to take it?
Yes,
can
we've got
keep it brief.
well, we're waiting for another one from someone. It's approximately, it was 1.9 originally. We're looking at some different permutations of it that could be anywhere from, you know, 1.8 to 2.1. But that was the most recent quote we had, and we're trying to get some more also.
Okay. I don't see the turf in here, but I was reading that you have to also probably replace the turf. So is that an additional cost, or is that embedded in the relocate the stadium, video boards, game clock, et cetera?
I can take that. I think the session ago, or maybe 2 sessions ago, we did get funding for the turf replacement that was targeted to do this year anyway. So that was already, the funding was already released, and we received that a few years ago, and the plan was to do it this summer.
Okay, so we already have that amount in there.
Yes, correct.
Okay, the other question I have is the consultant estimate. We have to hire a consultant for $2 million to tell us that?
No. The consultant is the source of the estimate for the work.
I'm sorry, say that again, I'm not quite.
Yeah, we could have just said estimate without the word consultant. We asked a consultant to give us an estimate.
An estimate of what, additional improvements?
You want to do the details, David, on this one?
Yeah, basically, we have a master plan from a few years ago that we had funding for to do, looking at, you know, the campus in the next 30, 40 years in lower campus. So we've kind of pivoted them to still doing that, but including this in their scope. So this was already,
Okay.
and then what they did is, this is just their estimate for the press box, electrical, a lot of different areas that aren't listed above.
I
That
see.
would need to be in, that's what it is. It's
Okay,
not the cost.
I thought you were hiring a consultant. I was like, oh my God. And what about the maintenance? Because, you know, at the stadium, you just go and you leave and somebody else cleans up. But, so is that an added cost that you have to factor in as well?
That would be under operating, and we run some budgets on that. We're obviously working with our facilities team and our facilities team on campus, as well as athletics. So yeah, that would be operating, but there will be some operating costs such as porta potties and just cleanup and, you know, even traffic monitoring, you know, for hiring police and traffic ingress for egress. That's correct.
Okay, so on the page that you're estimating the income and your ticket sales, premium, parking, et cetera, you show an income of about 3.2 million.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you show for TV, radio, corporate sponsorships, 5.9. So the 3.26 million, it is, and the income net positive from Aloha Stadium, according to your report, is 3.5 million. So you're going to be close to making what you would have made at the stadium, or am I missing something here?
No, the difference is, I think that was a net figure at the stadium, and I think this is a gross figure, but
Oh, it's a
also the
gross
difference,
figure.
we don't get parking concessions and merchandise and less sponsorship money at the stadium. We just only
Right.
get our ticket revenue, so there's
Right.
some additional revenue sources.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out what the deficit is compared to when you're over at the Aloha Stadium versus being at the Chin Complex after all the improvements I put in. So,
What,
go ahead.
yeah, you're asking what we would guess our net loss would be by moving over, or what the difference would be?
Yeah, what's the net loss per year that you don't play at the stadium?
We're thinking it's about $400,000.
400,000, okay.
And that's something the Regents had asked us for. They're also obviously concerned about it. So we presented that to them last month.
Okay, and then the radio, TV, corporate sponsorship, NCAA, that amounts to the 5.9 million. Is that what you normally get when you're playing at the stadium, or is that number different?
Yeah, that's the amount that's attributed, that we allocate to football according, based on our contract. So, yeah, that wouldn't be different than if we played at the stadium, or wherever we play doesn't matter as long as we can broadcast. That's the critical component.
Okay, so basically, when all is done, said and done, hopefully, that the net loss would be 400,000 a year.
That's what our estimate is, correct.
I think I want to add something though. At Aloha Stadium, we always had the hope of selling more and more tickets as the games continue to improve. And on this, we'll be topped out at the 10,000, assuming that's how many seats we get. So
And assuming you can sell all those
upside
seats.
at Aloha Stadium that we don't really have.
Yeah, assuming you can sell all those seats as well, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So the impact to the athletic program, because you're already running a deficit, right, at the athletic program?
That's correct. I mean, but we're trying to figure out a way to talk, to frame this a little bit better, but, every part of UH almost runs at a deficit. The math department has a deficit because it's supported by appropriated and generated funds. But the current allocation to the athletic department and the revenue generated, the expenses exceed those numbers. So
Is that 8 million? I forgot, what was that amount, that deficit?
that's a large number this year. David, you got it handy?
Yeah, the last number we had was 8.3 million. I think we're trying to head south on that, and I think we have a good chance of that. In a normal year, in the last 5 years, it's been anywhere between 1.9 million and I think 3.5-ish, under 4 million, and it's been as low as in the high 1 millions.
Okay, so the 8.3 million is not including the 400,000 or whatever anticipated loss
That's right.
we will be getting.
So the 8 is higher than the regular 1.5 to 4 because of COVID. So again, in the presentation to the Board of Regents, which we can send you, David identified the specific COVID-related financial impacts, and I think it was in the range of 6 million. Is that right, David?
Yeah, the net was we lost $14 million in revenue. We cut about $8 million in expenses, so it was just about $6 million incremental over what in a normal year.
Okay. How are you planning to make that up if you don't get any additional funding from the legislature?
We're taking that on as a campus responsibility. So we're looking both at the ideas from the Blue Ribbon Committee, and we're also looking at any other opportunities that we can seize. Obviously, generating revenue would be great, and we're also stepping up our game on philanthropy.
But at the end of the day, if there's a negative, it'll come out of,
It's the campus, as it has been for the last 20 years.
but if the campus is short, or because of COVID, if we don't get any more?
We're managing the entire campus pretty carefully, including athletics. We also are assessing the opportunity to use some of the federal relief funds. One of the provisions is to address revenue shortfalls caused by COVID. So we have those in several areas. We have wanted to see the total allocation from the federal government before we make large allocations, but as reported to the regents over the past month or so, athletics, student housing, parking, our auxiliaries have taken a hit. And so even well-managed auxiliaries that were in balance, and this is true across the country, as we have lost large amounts of revenue, that's an allowable use of the federal relief funds.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, any questions? Senator Hawai'i, you have questions? Go ahead.
I have a quick question going back to football. And shortly after the stadium announced that it was going to close, Mayor Victorino from Maui put out the welcome mat and said, "Come to our island." Can you tell me if anybody followed up with that offer to see if instead of spending $6.5 million at Ching Field, you could just fly your opponent and your team over to play games on Maui?
I did reach out to Mayor Victorino. We did not ever connect, but we did do the analysis of it. And like I said, I didn't get a response back, but he did say that, but we didn't have a direct conversation, but I did reach out.
So correct me if I'm wrong, UH subsidizes teams that come here from the Mountain West. You pay $150,000 or so, you charter a flight for them. So if you were to play on Maui, there would really be no added costs for that part of the equation, right? Because all of those expenses are already paid for. Your only added expense would be for the UH football team to fly from Oahu to Maui, the bus transportation, perhaps feeding them, and then flying them back to Oahu, which would be far less than losing $400,000 a year and making a $6.5 million investment.
I think our analysis shows that wouldn't be true. The other thing, what happens is we'd also probably have to, because of the time we have to play because of TV, we'd have to play at night, so we'd also have to stay in hotels. We'd also have some hotel costs potentially, and we wouldn't have as much control of the revenues or the facility, which I think would need some work too also.
Okay, but you've never actually...
The other thing too is the other thing besides the financial analysis, having our student athletes travel for 4 months straight, being on the road for every game, I know it's just Maui, but it's still a trip, is not in the best interest of our student athletes. So that was a factor also.
But isn't there the plus side that you're cultivating a new fan base? I mean, you're the University of Hawaii, you're not the University of Oahu. So playing on Maui and perhaps expanding to the neighbor islands, I don't know what the capacity is on Kauai and Big Island fields, but take this ugly situation and turn it into some lemonade by taking your show on the road to the neighbor islands and cultivating a new fan base and potentially new sponsorship opportunities.
I think there's no question that is true, and we have done clinics, events. We've had coaches go over there at the neighbor islands. We're going to continue to do that, and that will be our plans. We just felt that when you look at our student athlete welfare, traveling for 4 months straight is not in our best interest and could pose some health and safety issues because you actually get less practice when you travel. But I do agree with that it is definitely an opportunity, and that's why we've done clinics even on Molokai on different islands, and I think that's an important part of who we need to be as we go forward. So I agree with that.
Okay, but what you said was you've never actually talked to Mayor Victorino about the options on Maui, right? You just kind of throw messages to each other.
What I did is after he came out, I did reach out. I called and I left a message. I did not hear back. That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Welcome. Anybody else have more questions? Thank you, Donnie. Anything else?
Yeah, I have one more question. Should you be able to go forward with the complex for the Ching athletics field, would others be able to use your stadium, high schools, et cetera?
Could run it all.
Yes, there's the opportunity that obviously can be used for other events. The Hula Bowl would be one such example. High schools, we would love to host high schools. We have to talk with the NCAA about high schools playing on campus, so there might be some NCAA issues. We would, if we could, we'd seek a waiver for that, because that would be an opportunity going forward, as well as some other opportunities for local events.
Thank you, because if the stadium is going to be shut down, then the high schools also would not have,
A place to
a
play.
facility to play when they have their, playoffs, et cetera. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we will move on to the next item, Cancer Center. So we asked in 2019, the Cancer Center submitted a 3-page business plan, which really wasn't a complete plan for the early phase clinical trials program. And the plan had a lot of assumptions and it lacked details, which we asked for. So during our WAM briefing in this past January, the committee requested an updated comprehensive business plan. Since the construction for this program is starting this year from what you've said, mid-2021. So I guess I'm a little disturbed that what was submitted to us was not a business plan.
Yeah, maybe let me take that, Chair. I think I don't disagree with that the response we provided last month was not, let's see, I forgot when we provided it, January 26th, was not, did not provide it in the form of a business plan. And then when we got the request last week, I interpreted that as a comprehensive business plan for the Cancer Center, which we provided in this response. We do have a business plan just for the early phase clinical trial, and I will forward that to you. That was prepared by the Cancer Center, but last month, that is not what we sent in. I think that's accurate. And then this month, we interpreted the question to be a different question, not the same question.
Okay, because I was concerned because.
I agree with you.
Yeah, this is such an investment.
I noted it as well when you called and expressed your disappointment to Vice President Young. We did put it together, but then again, we responded to the February 17th request as a different question. So
Okay.
we'll send that over later today.
Okay, I appreciate that. Also, I guess I'm a little puzzled in the response to the committee's questions. It was said that you find our detailed scrutiny of the Cancer Center perplexing. Let me just remind you folks that it is our job to scrutinize the details. And for the last decade, the Cancer Center has faced a myriad of problems, beginning with the quote from Mr. Carboni saying, building a new $100 million facility in Kaka'ako using that faulty business plan, which has saddled the center with an $8 million annual mortgage payment it can't afford. And so Carboni resigned in November 2014, and the Cancer Center ended that fiscal year with a $9.5 million deficit, and we're running on reserves. Then in 2017, after the center had been running a $7 million annual deficit, it did drop to $2 million after cutting expenditures through attrition and operating efficiencies, which we appreciate. Also remind you that Representative Angus McKelvey, chairman of the Higher House Education Committee, said that they're going to have to prove they can be sustainable, that $2 million appropriation has to be treated as a stopgap item. So they're going to have to show down the road that they're going to have streams of revenue to replace it. This underscores the message of fiscal responsibility needed for the Cancer Center. And then in 2019, the state matched $6.5 million of a federal grant of the same amount. And so you know, this is an investment, and it's not just the $13 million, but a commitment and investment to the clinical trials program. And so this is the reasons why we scrutinize the budget. We don't want to have a faulty business plan like we started out with for the Cancer Center. So I hope that kind of satisfies the perplexity that the Cancer Center is having regarding our detailed scrutiny.
Fair enough. I think, you know, you should review the business plan we provided for the whole Cancer Center and the one we'll send you on the early phase clinical trials program.
Okay.
And see what you think. I think from our perspective within the university, we believe we have turned this program around, and I hope we can convince you of the same. And I'm confident you will find other programs to scrutinize equally intensely, but I don't.
Well, you know, I scrutinize all the programs, right?
Yeah,
I'm
this is not one that keeps me up at night, Senator Kim, I can assure you, compared to many other things.
Well, maybe that's because we have been scrutinizing it, that now you can, you know, be more rest assured. Okay.
Well, I want to credit the leadership of Randy Holcomb, the director, who was the right person to come in with, you know, an MD background, Cancer Center administrative background, and an MBA.
Okay.
And he's really moved forward on this early phase clinical trials program, which our external advisors told us was the highest priority to really improve cancer care in Hawaii.
But that's not what the study that you folks asked for or commissioned said. Let me go on. I keep hearing that the Cancer Center, that they're not running a deficit and they're not using general funds. And even in last committee, Joe Ramos said, we haven't asked for money from you in the past several years. And no, we're not going to ask you to subsidize the early clinical trials, which, you know, I'm happy to hear that. But on March 27, 2020, Governor released UH's request for $2.8 million in the FY20 general fund contingency restrictions for general funds from the to support the center's faculty salaries from your UH contingency fund. So if they're not getting general funds, what is this considered?
So I was not at the last hearing, and I can't speak to exactly what was said in what context. The Cancer Center, like athletics, like the math department, like most parts of UH, does receive an institutional allocation. All of our ORUs receive institutional allocations, as do our instructional units. Those tend to be a mix of general funds and tuition and fee special funds, which, as you know, we consider largely fungible. I guess what Dr. Ramos was saying is really that we're not asking for new money. Now, that said, the particular allocation from the governor was based on a discussion I had with the governor. As you know, each year he restricts in the range of 10%, those numbers can vary, of what is considered to be our discretionary funding. And typically, again, it varies from year to year. Half of that is what he calls a hard restriction, and half is called a contingency restriction. And as we were busily turning around the Cancer Center, and it doesn't turn around on a dime, I did ask Governor Ige if he would be willing to release the contingency restriction to UH Manoa to help us turn around the Cancer Center. As I think you know, when we were asking for new general funds to support the Cancer Center, the governor tended to support those requests in his executive budget each year. The legislature did not. So while we stopped asking the legislature for money, we did request the governor's help. He provided that for a couple of years, and the last time that was released, I did advise Director Holcomb and his team that that was the last year that we would be able to get that special appropriation in place. And the business plan or financial plan that you see for the entire Cancer Center that we provided yesterday does not reflect that level of institutional investment.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that, because even last time when we had Dr. Ho come in, he insisted that they were self-sustaining, that they didn't have needed any general funds, weren't using any general funds, which was very perplexing for me in that sense, because I knew that they were getting general funds. Because when the Cancer Center was built, it was supposed to be on the tobacco funds only, right?
That is before my day, Senator.
Yes, so since then, and since the deficit with the tobacco funding, we had been giving, or UH has been also giving general funds.
I mean, actually, I'd say that would totally surprise me, because the Cancer Center has been receiving general funds for decades. We've had a Cancer Center long before we had the new building or the cigarette tax revenue. So I think, again, when we use terms like deficit and self-sustaining, they can be a challenge depending on the set of assumptions we have. If you see the financial plan that's provided, there is about 5.1 million in general and tuition and fee funds, and that represents essentially the campus allocation to the Cancer Center.
Okay, so they are getting more than the 2.
That's 5.1 out of 46 million.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that, because I kept hearing that they weren't getting any, but I was told otherwise from other people that they were.
Again, they're not asking for more, and that special allocation from the governor has terminated.
Okay, so the 5.1 million plus they were getting the 2.8 million from the governor?
During that turnaround period, yes.
So now it's just the 5.1 million?
That is correct.
And that's going to continue?
That is correct.
Can you give us the breakdown of how much of that is general funds, how much of that is tuition?
It is on the 12th page of what we provided to you yesterday. 2.8 million in general funds and 2.2 million in tuition and fee funds. But again, we consider those fungible.
Okay, I guess some of the complaints I've received from some of the university people is saying that how can you use tuition funds for a program that doesn't teach generally students?
Well, you and I have talked about this many times, and I know you don't like the answer.
Well, it's not I don't like the answer. That's the complaint and the criticism
I'm
coming
happy to
from.
explain for the complainants that beginning in the mid-1990s, the legislature in effect asked the university to begin to support our operations with tuition. And while the law that was passed, as you know, says that our appropriation should not be decreased based on that, in fact, as recessions have hit, our general fund appropriations have been decreased. Not saying that's wrong, but that is the reality. And so our general operations of the university are now about 40%, this is across 10 campuses, are 40% supported by tuition that we generate. And that cuts across all sorts of activities: education, research, support, electricity bills. The general funds that we receive are not adequate to fully fund our legislatively appropriated positions. So that's why tuition and general funds are largely fungible for us.
Well, I think the parents out there who pay these tuition, they're not happy that their tuition is going for services other than teaching their students, that it's going for researchers or the Cancer Center, and how much of that tuition monies that we're paying is in S397 and that we're paying the fringe? That's the other question.
Yeah, I'm guessing it would be substantial.
Okay, then I really have an issue with that. And as far as what is the current balance in the S397? Because we were told back last year that you're trying to keep that number down and lower it. So have that number gone up?
I don't believe so, but I think maybe Vice President Young might be able to answer that.
Okay, why don't we come back to that, Calvert,
Okay.
so we can stay on this and then remind me that we have that.
I mean, we could, you know, Director Holcomb would be perfectly happy if we replaced all of the tuition allocation with general funds. If that would make the complainants happier. But in general, all of our basic education and research and support functions are funded with a mix of general funds and tuition, just as is the basic operation of the university.
Okay, well, I would like the regents at some point to take this up, to make that policy decision on whether or not tuition dollars should be spent for non-educational, or I shouldn't say educational, for non-teaching of the people that are actually paying the tuition. I think that's a policy decision, a question that should be answered at some point, so we can, once and for all.
Well, again, I'd say not if, I mean, you may not accept our premise that these are our fungible operating dollars, which is the case at most universities, but that is the way we've treated it. So that would be, you know, probably the more fundamental question to ask the regents to address.
But shouldn't, again, that question about researchers getting tuition dollars and general fund dollars, whereas all other universities require a majority of that salaries to be brought in by extramural funding? And
I think you have a separate set of questions about that.
Yes, I know, but I'm just saying so that, you know, that there's that overlap and concern that continues.
I mean, every cancer center every NCI designated cancer center in a public institution is supported with public funds. I mean, this is part of what we do to ease the burden of cancer on the people of Hawaii. So it's.
Well, that's why you were given the tobacco tax, and you guys put together a faulty plan that said you would be getting X amount of money that would be enough to fund the cancer program, and then turned out that that was a faulty plan because it didn't take into consideration people would stop smoking, and that money would get less.
Well, and
so.
ironically, and worst of all, part of our cancer prevention program is part of what has reduced the number of people who smoke and the consumption of cigarettes. So it's kind of an awkward position
Right.
that the better we do, the more we hurt ourselves financially in that particular
Right,
regard.
but that should have been factored into the plan, right? I mean, that was going to happen.
Again, this is, you know, I was a happy chief information officer in those days, Senator.
Okay, but as president, you inherit what happens in the past.
I certainly have. And
As
I-
others will inherit what you've done going into the future.
And I hope they're happy with it.
Okay, so in the 2019 so-called business plan that we got, it assumed that for the early clinical trials, that 2 principal clinical partners would be needed to initially invest $2.5 million and then another $2.5 million each over the next 5 years. So has that been shored up? Because that was
I think
assumed.
this is about when I hand off to Director Holton.
Okay.
So our clinical partners in the Hawaii Cancer Consortium, hello, Chair and Vice
Hello.
Chair, I'm sorry, and committee members. Our clinical partners in the Hawaii Cancer Consortium have committed to support the effort to develop an early phase clinical research center. Funding comes through the Hawaii Cancer Consortium, and there are budget lines within our Hawaii Cancer Consortium annual budget for that. We deferred those this year because of the pandemic and COVID-19 and various cash flow issues that all of our clinical partners had this year related to that. They expect that those cash flow problems will be ameliorated by the next fiscal year, and that funding will be available to help support those activities.
Okay, so let me get it straight. So the 2 clinical partners that you talked about in your plan, $2.5 million each initially, you have commitments for that. That is solid.
I have commitments through the Hawaii Cancer Consortium, which includes more than 2 clinical partners.
No, I'm just asking for
And
what
the
was,
funding,
let me
The
just
funding
say,
comes through the Hawaii Cancer Consortium.
okay,
And there is a commitment for $2.5 million at least over the next 5 years for the early phase clinical research center.
okay. Because in your business plan that you submitted to us, it said initial investment by UHCC will be 2.5 million
That's the cancer
initially.
center.
And 2 principal clinical partners will also invest 2.5 million over 5 years, either directly or through the Hawaii Cancer Consortium. So my question
I
is,
agree with you.
did we have those 2 principal clinical partners? And are we getting the initial investments, which would be 5 million? And then will we be getting the 2.5 million from each of them over the next 5 years?
So what you just read is 2.5 million from the cancer center, which we have encumbered within funds here at the cancer center for that. And $2.5 million from our main clinical partners or through the Hawaii Cancer Consortium over the next 5 years. And yes, we have that confirmed.
Okay, so again, so we have 2 clinical partners, each giving 2.5 million initially.
That's not what that says, Senator.
That's what you said, overall initial and overall investment. Initial investment by HCC will be 2.5 million over the next 5 years. Each of the 2 principal clinical partners will also invest 2.5 million over the next 5 years.
That is correct.
In addition, UHCC investment derived recent philanthropic gift of $2 million to the UH Foundation. So that I saw in the report that you gave, right?
We actually have much more than that $2 million already. And the UH Foundation has raised another $500,000 over the last 3 months for this project.
Okay, so hopefully the business plan that will be submitted will show all of these numbers, President?
It will. And it will have forecasts moving forward.
Okay, and then,
I want to say here, we are redacting the specific names of the philanthropic and business
Okay.
partners.
that's
But you
fine.
can see the numbers.
Okay. And then what about the maintenance and operational costs? Is that spelled out too in the business plan?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, I'll look forward to that. Okay, anybody else would have any questions for the Cancer Center members? If not, okay, thank you. Let's move on to Atherton Ymca. And I thank you for that business plan, President. That I consider a business plan. But let me ask you, what is the status of the debt service on the existing mortgage? I could not find that in the business plan, or did I miss it?
And this goes over to a combination of Vice Presidents Young and Sierros.
Okay, hand it off.
Yeah, so actually, just to recap on the background, so Atherton is actually a real estate property owned by the UH Foundation. So the UH Foundation acquired the property back in 2016, I believe, and to do so, they did take out a mortgage. So the foundation is carrying the foundation has the mortgage on the property.
But we're paying, because we signed a lease with them, right? We signed an agreement.
So currently, the university has a lease of the property that happens to equal the original mortgage levels for the foundation.
Okay, so that's,
But the cost is actually, for the university, the cost is via an operational lease.
okay, but technically, we're paying the debt service on the mortgage, right? I mean, that's what's in our lease. It just happens to be the exact same.
Yeah, we pay the foundation for the lease. What the foundation is supposed to do is use that to pay their mortgage.
Okay, so where is that money coming from? Because I did not see that in the business plan.
So originally, this project back in 2016 was done through UH Manoa Housing. So up until late part of 2020, it was still largely funded through student housing. But over the last 1.5 to 2 years, it's actually, a lot of that funding has been reduced as it's been migrated over to support coming from innovation or innovation activities.
When you say innovation activities, do you mean the Manoa Innovation Center?
That's part of the entire ecosphere around innovation, but Manoa Innovation has net revenues for the university, and so some of that has helped to fund the innovation or the Atherton project.
So Calber, why isn't all that information given when we asked? Because when we asked for the business plan and everything, shouldn't all that cost be articulated out? I mean, that's what we're looking for. What's the cost? Because somebody's got to be paying for it. Got to be coming from somewhere.
Yeah, so that plan that we put together, which I'll loosely call it a business plan, because it's actually we actually constructed that for other purposes to kind of outline the overall project for prospects,
Okay.
i.e. investors, donors.
Okay.
But I think you would agree, it's pretty comprehensive for what it provides.
Yeah, but it
so
leaves out some
actually-
stuff.
I'm sorry?
But it leaves out some things that's why I'm following up on this. So,
Well, it doesn't lay out what I just laid out to you for the current situation, because the current situation is going to be actually terminating very soon. So the plan had always been for UH, this lease that the university currently has and has had for about 3.5 years now, that has to terminate
Right.
in order to do the project.
right. But you still need to account for that funds. I mean, at the end of the day, what the overall project cost is, what's the overall project going to be cash flow, that has, all of this cost should be factored into it. So we have an accurate idea, right, as to what we're investing and what we're getting.
Yeah, investing, that's a good word. So only a few of us at the university kind of viewed this project as like an investment opportunity. But I think in the materials that were provided to you, based on what the project team is forecasting, there's net revenue opportunities. So internal to UH, we are treating the monies invested from innovation as equity share in the project. And the equity share, if you look at the bottom line on the financial forecasts, is the net revenues that we anticipate to be sharing with the landowner, which is Foundation.
And the net revenue is, without me going through this?
So it's the eye chart, the spreadsheets that are in there.
Right.
The cash flow analysis pro forma.
Yeah, but
That runs out, we run it out from 2024, which is the anticipated active date of the go live for the project, out through 2061, which is the forecasted duration of the private partner involvement. So basically the P3 investor.
So we're going to make money.
And-
You're saying we're going to make money.
Well, that's my desire, my hope, my objective, and
Okay.
based on what the investor and the private development partner is working towards via this pro forma, which is actually not our creation. It's actually part of the
So
project. private project.
when would this profit be realized?
Yeah, so again, these pro formas are based on as current forecasts and revisions to the overall project itself. But the way to look at it is if you look at the bottom line, which is the additional ground rent. If you look at it's like nearly the very last, literally the last line on any of those spreadsheets, right? The additional ground rent, that is in the P3 world, that's basically net revenue that comes back to the public partner. So this would be, in this case, would be Foundation. That amount would be split between foundation as the property owner with the university as the affiliate partner. So on the very first pro forma page, 2024 to 2034, you'll see that starting in 2027 it is forecasted the additional ground rent is just shy of 650,000, but the line right below that, the cumulative ground rent, embedded in above that line is roughly an anticipation of about 300,000 a year, starting in year one. Okay. So the foundation, as part of their scheduled revenue, is anticipated to get from the private development partner $300,000 for the use of the Atherton property.
Okay, but this is all assumptions based on 320 beds, correct?
It's based on, right, the number of beds, units, and
Right.
activities.
So it's based on 320 beds for 12 months with an occupancy of 95%.
Building to
correct?
an occupancy of 95%.
Is that correct?
Yes, building to an occupancy of
Okay.
95%.
But isn't it true that most of the resident halls have a vacancy of 2 to 3 months during the year because of the summer nature of it? And that pre-COVID, all of these units had an occupancy of 85%?
So for on-campus student housing, that model, that's true. But for privatized student housing, that's not the model. So in privatized student housing, so the example is
But you're talking about Hawaii, and you're talking about rents of $19,415 annually for one bedroom, which is $9,708 per semester, which turns out to be $1,941.60 a month, if I calculate correct. My staff people said, that's more than what they pay for their rents. Who's gonna pay that? For an apartment so long with kitchen and everything,
So that level is higher than on-campus, university-run student housing. It is. But it is also looking at a comparative model against another privatized student housing that already exists down the street from UH Manoa.
And what's their occupancy?
They opened in I believe in time for fall 2019. And when they opened, they achieved 50% occupancy. As recently as pre-COVID, 2020, they were up to 85% occupancy. And their rates are higher than what is in the pro forma forecast for Atherton.
And did they rent it 12 months a year?
And so privatized student housing is a 12-month lease. And that's the model that is being applied here. Now, that's a different private partner, and it's a different housing operator than our partner here. But that's already a precedent in the marketplace.
Okay, so again, it's all in the details, right? Because any of that thing could fall through. What happens if the PRU does not grant you 320 beds and reduce that number?
Yeah, so in this P3 model, the private developer is assuming nearly all of the risk, right? Because they need this project to get developed, because they're the ones actually putting up all the vertical construction costs. So the number of bed units has migrated over the last several years. It's gone up, it's gone down. The rates have changed in reflection of that. The use of how the space that's available in the building itself can be redeployed to different revenue models, all of that. So that's why these pro formas constantly have to change and adapt. So if they cannot achieve 320 bed units, there are options for the developer, right? They could look for other revenue opportunities. They could change the rate mix. They could change the room compositions to increase the rate charges, you know, if you're in the 3 or 4 bed model versus a 2 bed or a single.
Right, but if there's a
different rates,
reduction, it's going to affect the numbers, right? If there's a reduction in the number of beds.
Any change on any of the things, including beds, changes the overall economic mix for the project.
And it'll change the financials that, you know.
It could potentially change the financials.
You know, you folks built the Hilo dorms and had all of the projections and everything, and that turned out to be a problem because the vacancy rate really went down. We did the pharmacy school, and that went down. I mean, so, you know, all these models and all of these program plans that we put out there, or UH has put out there, somehow it's fallen short. And, I mean, the proof's in the pudding. So, you know, that's why we scrutinize these numbers, because we don't want to see that happen again as we're embarking on some of these investments that we're putting in.
I would say nothing against UH or any other public state agency, but these numbers, these numbers are with a private developer, operator, investor. I mean, they are putting up the money. They are in this business.
Okay.
Right? I like to make money. Okay, I do. But these guys, you know, these are businesses that are, their whole business line is building these projects, running these projects. They want to make money, and they design these projects to make money.
But
I assume.
Calvert, how many businesses go out of business in any given time?
No, I know that it's a risk. It's
a
always a
risk,
risky
yes.
endeavor. It is always a risky endeavor.
So, you know, I don't necessarily believe all of when they come to us, and I've had a lot of them do our public housing, and they're no longer with us because there were issues, and they couldn't fulfill what they said they were going to fulfill. So I wouldn't buy it hook, line, and sinker just because they're a private entity. So I hope we're scrutinizing these numbers well.
Yes,
because
yeah, well, UH is the whole value is UH is the affiliate partner that is necessary in the project. And while we're not committing a whole lot of equity into the, you know, to the project, what I'm trying to say is I'm relying on investors have an embedded interest that this succeeds, and real estate is an inherently risky proposition.
Okay, let me
But
move on.
we're not the ones that are absorbing a lot of the risk.
Okay, because I know we're running, our time is running out. So can you provide the breakdown of, you know, who's paying for the last 2.5 years and since the project started, all of that, how much does it cost the university, and what funds were you using to pay in the last 2.5 years? From the Manoa Innovation Center, from housing, who's paying this? How much has been paid so far, and who's paying it? What is the PRU timeline? What have been the development costs up to this date? Like, who's paying the development costs, the PRU application, the surveys, the outreach, the construction documents, the design documents, the EA, the permits? Who's paying for all of that?
That I can tell you, that is the private development.
Okay, so they're paying for it all, okay.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't in there, so I just want to make sure. And, you know, and all of this cost and what you've provided, has that been approved by the regents? So anybody from the regents here can respond to that? Jan Sullivan or Mr. Westerman or? Hi, Jan.
Hi, Chair Kim and members. The Calvert has done a good job of periodically updating the regents on the status of all of the real estate projects that is involved. We have not gotten into a lot of the details, primarily because the project is really being driven by the UH Foundation, who has taken ownership of it and has an agreement, this is my understanding, directly with the developer.
Okay, so is
That
it
is
your,
correct.
I believe the foundation's board, executive committee, has been pretty deeply involved in this though, but not the UH Board of Regents.
okay, so is it the Regent's opinion that there is no financial risk, that the financial risk in assessment or debt assessment, that there's none to the University of Hawaii?
Well, Chair Kim, you know I cannot speak for the board, so I can give you my opinion
Okay,
on the university's position. I think, as Calvert said, is we have a lease with the foundation, and that is the financial risk. So my personal opinion, and I have personally communicated this with the leadership of the foundation, is that the foundation should help to alleviate and take out that financial risk to the university.
but there
And
is
I-
risk right now, right? There is
It
risk.
currently is, but I do believe the foundation is seriously trying to move forward to mitigate that. It's a little early to, I think, report anything, but
Okay. Well, I'm just
I-
concerned that the regents need to take a more active role on this, if there's any kind of risk that could be assumed by the university. And once this initial investment, or in whatever it is, the foundation and our leases ended, and this project goes forward, then what is the risk if, in fact, we cannot rent all of those units and it doesn't pan out, and there is no ground rents or whatever would we say, additional ground rent, and there is no profits on this? What is the risk to the university? And I think that's something that the regents should address, or at least, have something to say about this.
Yeah, so I'll just say, Senator, that what you just laid out as outlined, what the university and the foundation is negotiating towards, is that there's no risk or liability, whether this project is fully occupied or not occupied or under occupied. It's not there's no implications for the university, except for what we are counting on is we want a share of that net revenue that's on the pro forma that I just laid out for you. If they don't have sufficient revenues,
Okay.
that's going to get impacted. But the minimum ground lease rent, the $300,000 a year, that's baked in. So that's like our floor.
So you're
So-
saying that an empty building or a half-filled building across the university, of which supposed to be part of your campus, and that it's not going to have any kind of implication or risk to the university, that if it doesn't pan
Well,
out?
I would consider them qualitative risk, reputational risk, right? Property risk across the street. But in terms of financial obligations on the university, what we're working towards in these P3 models, it's not incumbent on us to fill the beds. We will help out to fill the beds they will be our students. We will help to provide that as an opportunity for our students if the students want to stay there. But we also have student housing on campus.
Yes, but
And
you
that's
needed
not-
more campus. Weren't you looking at this as additional housing for students? I mean, initially, that's what it started out to be?
Yeah, so in that business plan that show, we have, the developer has done the market study that already indicates there's an undersupply of student housing choices. So it's not just cheap student housing, which UH offers with on-campus housing. It's the full selection choice of diversified student housing options. So that's what this will provide,
Okay.
right? So I believe that there will be, there's always housing needs. Whether or not we can fill these beds in here, the university is certainly intended to help, but the risk if they can't fill the beds is not, we don't want it to be a financial liability on the university to have to support the project itself. That's why we go into these P3 models.
Okay, but that's bothersome, because here we have an opportunity to utilize the space supposedly for good for the university and for the community. And, you know, as we get on, I'm going to talk about this whole thing on functional use of space. And that for you to just sit there and say, well, you know, it doesn't matter if it gets rented or not, doesn't matter to us, there's no risk to us. I mean, it's a bad attitude to have as to how we manage the university and manage our properties and any agreements or business investments that we go into. So I hope you guys will take a closer look at that. The other question I have is, why are there non-revenue spaces in this building, classrooms and office spaces? Because the business school is not going to be paying for the office space. And when we were in Utah, there was not one business office and not one classroom in that model. And so why is that being put into this project?
Actually, if I can, Chair Kim, at the Utah Lasan studio, the ground floor was non-revenue space. Nobody paid rent for that. And
no, but it was for the innovation for the students. It wasn't office space for teachers, or it wasn't classroom space. They had one kind of a room, and then, you know, they had spaces on each floor, but they didn't have any classroom or any office spaces for faculty or staff or whatever.
So that space that you're referring to as non-revenue space is the innovation program space.
So staff's not going to be in there? Business school is not going to have?
The staff who run the innovation programs. I think, you know, I'm sorry, maybe Vice President Sturmos can speak to this a little bit better.
Senator, in Utah, there were no office space or classrooms. Here there are. There is some office space, I think, on the second or the third floor. The developer is looking to actually rent that space or part of that space. And then there is a small office space for the PACE program that runs their innovation programs out of there. So that's the way the building is configured right now.
So PACE is not going to be paying any rent?
They're not going to be paying any rent, but they're going to be paying COM. I think that's the agreement right now.
Okay,
and
so
again, as Calvert says, all these are preliminary. Things are going to tie up or going to become a little bit tighter as we see the peer review how it comes out.
Okay, so let me...
Yeah, so actually, Senator, that's actually a really good example. The original project concept had a far more broader, allowance for these non-revenue spaces, for academic spaces. But as the, things around the project itself have changed, the composition of units in the space have changed. The square footage that's allowable for this has shrunk. And if, like your example, hypothetically, if the PRU was impacted or if the bed counts, and they have to look for other revenues, this is probably going to be one area that might get taken from the developer and converted into something that might help the overall economics rather than, non-revenue generated space. So this is a vestige of the original project concept where the private developer and the foundation and the university thought that this innovation classroom academic space would be, attractive and valuable for the overall project. But that's one of the things that can fall off.
Okay, so this segues me into Sinclair Library. So what are the functional uses of space in Sinclair, and how are those different from the functional uses at Atherton? What's similar and what's different? And, you spent a lot of time on the space utilization project. We talked about not increasing square footage, and yet, did you do the study on the function on this two projects like you've done for the rest of the space utilization project study for the rest of the university? So Regents, do you guys know of any of that? Because it was your folks' resolution, right? as far as no more square footage and so forth?
If I can, Senator, the Sinclair does not add footage. It's a renovation of an existing facility to repurpose
Right.
it.
To
So there's no addition.
No, but the addition is Atherton, but you have the opportunity at Sinclair to encompass some of these repurpose and to put in the innovation. Because my understanding is you do have at the Sinclair Library, you do have, what is that? Student, what's the words that they use? Strategic space, creative space, student excellent and creativity space in Sinclair, which is very similar to what's at the Innovation Center. Not to mention that we have Manoa Innovation Center as well. So has that study been done, Jan, as far as looking at the Sinclair, Atherton, Manoa Innovation Center under the space utilization project? Or maybe Jan Govell?
Yes, Senator, I think I know what you're getting after, and not in that level of detail where we actually compared and broke down the actual space utilization in the Atherton project. I think it's still being developed. It is my understanding that the bulk of the Atherton space is being utilized for, student housing.
Right.
And the portion that is set aside for office and innovation space, I believe, is still kind of somewhat in fluctuation, but is viewed more as a program, or is being treated more as a programmatic space for a particular program, whereas the Student Success Center is really built around general, a lot more generalized use of space for basically all students. And it's more about enhancing the academic.
But we're splitting hairs here, Jan. Come on. I mean, if things are to the point where we need to look at how we're going to move into the next decade, the next century, and how we need to make changes, then this space can be multi-used. So to say that, one space is for more general and the other for more programmatic, I'm sure there's space within Sinclair that can also be put aside as programmatic as well. So, and then you have the Innovation Center at Manoa. I mean, you have all of these other uses, and I would hope that you would put that into the space utilization so we have a comprehensive study and not a piecemeal study of whatever it is that, fits whatever university is trying to push forward.
Maybe I can jump in here and provide a little bit of clarity on these three spaces. And maybe you've heard that before, Senator. The Manoa Innovation Center, though it has the title innovation, it is a very different space, look, feel, and functionality with the Atherton, and a little bit different with Sinclair. So the Manoa Innovation Center is an incubator type of space for startups and other type of activities like an office space. The Atherton is specific in programs that they run for entrepreneurship and innovation. There are programs that they're driven both by business school and the PACE. And PACE is not just the business school. I just want to make sure that actually it encompasses the whole university, not only Manoa, but UH system. And right now they're working with engineering, so they're running actual programs of innovation and entrepreneurship within that space.
So Vasilis, what's the square footage of the programmatic square footage of Atherton for this innovation program?
The innovation program is around 15,000 square feet, including classrooms, the first floor.
Not including the classrooms. What is just the programmatic space?
It is around, without including classrooms and offices, is around 8,000 square feet.
And what's the size of the Sinclair Student Center, Success Center?
I would turn to Jan on that, but I want to say, at least I know the bottom plate is around 15,000 square feet, 12,000 square feet. So I would think the first floor is also 12,000 square feet, if I'm not mistaken, Jan.
Yeah.
Jump in and correct me.
We're still in the kind of the pre-design phase, but we've got probably at close to 25,000 total gross square feet that is being partitioned off into multiple types of uses.
Right, so it could incorporate.
Oh, yes.
So that's the point I'm trying to make, and that why shouldn't it be studied as well? Why shouldn't we have a breakdown? And if what you say is true, Vasilis, then why shouldn't that be part of this plan so we can see it?
We, as Jen said, we never looked holistically of the interplay of the two buildings. That is something that maybe we could look at.
No, but I asked for that last year. Didn't I ask you to look at that, Jen?
You did. You asked me to look at it for sure,
Yeah.
Senator Kemp.
And I want to say that Regent
Yeah.
Sullivan actually came and toured Sinclair, and we said, oh my God, what is Regent Sullivan is doing? So she did. Regent
Yeah.
Sullivan did.
And we also went to Utah, so, yeah, so.
Honestly, I mean, you folks can correct me if I'm wrong, but I was told that we're stuck with the floor plate on Sinclair for a lot of reasons. We can't add anything to it. And that
Why?
there was a whole jigsaw thing for, I think, structural reasons. There's a practical structural problem with adding more onto it.
Well, not so much adding whatever they have existing, because as we saw in Utah, it's a wide open space, so it's not as if you need to have partitions and so forth. I mean,
Well, I was told that the Manoa campus had its own plan for moving people around from other buildings into this building, and the whole upstairs was already accounted for, and that they had their own plan for the ground floor. So
That is correct.
it went nowhere, and that's the truth.
no, I realize that, but this doesn't mean that it couldn't have been changed. Because with COVID, and COVID wasn't there at the time, I mean, everything's changed. So we may not have that many students coming in on campus. I mean, you don't know what the future's going to look like. So why are we looking at plans and doing plans that was pre-COVID and not trying to look at how we can tailor this so the university can be more efficient and make better use of what they have on campus and some of the dwindling dollars that's there. Okay, we are running 8 minutes. I have 8 minutes. So I know we're not going to get through all of this. We may have to put this up to get to the rest. But they asked for a number of things, so perhaps you can get that in and we can add in additional meeting to review what you submit as well as go over those things that we didn't get to. So I don't have any objections to that. And I hope that the regents will take up some of these stuffs because it really shouldn't be the legislature. If you guys really want autonomy, then I would think that you guys need to really take a look at some of these details and have greater oversight on what's going on. And I'm not saying that it's wrong or it's bad or it's good. I'm just saying that, we just want to make sure the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and that in 3, 4, 5 years, you don't come to us and say, oh my God, the forecast wasn't right. We're going to need extra funding. We have only 50% occupancy. All of these things that have happened in the past tend to, come back to us and haunt us. So I'm just trying to make sure that you folks are looking at everything from all points of view and make sure that we have the best plan and we're utilizing the funding in the best interest of the students and of the university. Okay, anybody has any questions, anything they want to add? Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and thank you all for being available, and thank you all for, responding to our questions. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. We are adjourned.